Hello, everyone, and welcome to my second ever podcast. It's still going to be called the Chosen One Podcast because my name is Mujtaba, and that means chosen one in Arabic. So, yeah, it wasn't a Harry Potter reference. It's actually what my name means, so that's why it's called the Chosen One Podcast. But yeah, and for this podcast, I decided to go with again something that I'm very passionate about and something that's been in my life ever since I was a kid. And in this one, I'm going to talk about DC and Marvel. Um, I'm not going to talk about as some people like to bring up the comparisons, the battle between the two universes. I don't have a side or anything. I love both universes. I love both the superheroes. I love both the villains in the universes. If I were to identify myself to a specific one, it'd be DC a little bit more, just because I grew up watching the cartoons and the animated series, and I read some of the comics a bit more when I was little. And Batman and Flash are two of my favorite superheroes, so that's why I do like DC a little bit more, but it's not like a gaping different. It's not like I hate Marvel or anything. I love Marvel. In fact, I think Marvel has probably had more of an impact on my teenage to mid 20s life, more than DC. So, but we'll get into that later. So, first let's start off with DC because I feel like DC needs a bit more discussion in terms of what they're doing with their movies and what's going on in the universe. I think Marvel, has a very solid plan on what they're gonna be doing for the next 10 years. So let's start with DC and then we'll work our way towards Marvel, and then we'll go with that. And this time I actually wrote down a few topics, things I wanted to touch on. In the first podcast, I just kind of spoke from the top of my head, and I realized there were some parts where I was kind of like thinking on what to say and what to talk about. But in this one, I have some stuff written down that I'm going to bring up during the podcast, and hopefully it leads to a very good dialogue and conversation about what I'm trying to say and what I'm trying to get across. So yeah, let's begin with DC. And I guess the biggest movie that DC has right now uh, in its universe, that's coming out, would be Aquaman. And lately we got some new information about Aquaman. I think about last week, we got some pictures from Aquaman. We got confirmation of a trailer or a teaser dropping during Comic-Con in July. So I think Aquaman is going to be a very important movie for the DC universe because, as we all know, Justice League was mediocre at best. It didn't make the money that DC would hope it would make, and the reviews weren't anything great, anything. So I wouldn't say Justice League was a fail. I don't think any DC movie has been a failure, besides maybe Green Lantern. But fans were hoping a lot more from the Justice League, especially since how great the Avengers is. So I think the Justice League fell short on what, both money wise and movie production wise. So this Aquaman film that's coming out in December, I think, is very important. I think we didn't see much of Aquaman in Justice League. Just he had a few lines here and there, and some of his action scenes. And I understand that they're gonna use the movie to introduce him to like get audiences deeper into him, obviously. So I was fine with him not being uh, you know being that, since he's having a movie coming out in a couple, by the end of the year, because Justice League came out this year, right, at 2018. So, or no, actually came out, sorry, 2017. Where am I? It was late 2017. And so basically Aquaman is coming out December 2018, so basically a year later. So I can get why he wasn't very, and the runtime for Justice League was 2 hours. They had to put in a lot of stuff. I could see why they couldn't really go in depth into Aquaman. So because this movie's coming out, so which is why I think they went more in depth with the Flash, because the Flash movie, we don't know, maybe 2020. So they wanted to get a bit of a more intro into Flash, and Aquaman was like, okay, you know what, your movie's coming out soon. We'll have you'll have some lines, you'll have some scenes, but that's about it. So, what are my expectations for this Aquaman movie? It's hard to say. I think I'm happy with who's directing it. I think James Wan is a very solid director, and we've known him from horror movies like The Conjuring, and I think he did Conjuring too, or yeah. But I do like his horror movies. I think he did a Fast and Furious movie, maybe Fast and Furious 6 or 7, one of them. So I do think he's a solid director. I think he can uh, bring life to some to what basically we all imagine Aquaman to be. Even though Zack Snyder kind of created this version of Aquaman, I feel like it's better to have a different director take the reins, just like we've seen with Patty Jenkins and Wonder Woman. So I think James Wan can hopefully create some magic with Aquaman. I do like the cast as well. I know we have Nicole Kidman, we have Patrick Wilson, William Dafoe, and I'm not sure. I don't think I know the name of the guy playing the villain, but I think he's a solid actor too. So yeah, and then Amber Heard, obviously. So and then Jason Momoa, I think, is a very solid Aquaman. He looks the part. He doesn't look like he's forcing the role or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, I think I have high hopes for this Aquaman movie, and I know that a lot of people are kind of done with DC after Justice League and Suicide Squad and Batman v Superman, but the solo movies that don't have uh, Zack Snyder like directing them, I think Man of Steel it could have been a lot better. Just obviously BVS could have been better, and then Justice League could have been better. So I do trust the movies that are directed by other people. Wonder Woman was great, one of my favorite movies last year, and I think Aquaman has a chance to be great as well. It could be very visually pleasing. The one thing that I am worried about is that some of the scenes in Atlantis in Justice League looked very rough. Some of the CG looked kind of it wasn't great. Let's just put it to that. And I think because Aquaman has been so hushed up, and reportedly they're working very hard on the effects and the CG in post production. So I think they're spending a lot of time in that, and trying to make it look like it's underwater and it doesn't look bad or anything. I think that they're doing that is a good job, and I hope it comes out as good as I can imagine it, because I think an Aquaman movie with great visuals and great story could be very good. So that's what I'm hoping, because a lot of people have kind of given up on DC, but I still have that hope, because we have some other stuff coming up about or coming up with DC. We also have the future Batman film, which we heard about a little bit early on. We do know that Matt Reeves is directing it, and most likely Ben Affleck will not be returning as Bruce Wayne or Batman. And it was, I'm not sure what to think about this, because I thought I read somewhere in an interview that Ben Affleck was ecstatic about Matt Reeves, and at first, well, the first thing we heard was that Ben Affleck was going to direct this movie himself and write it. So, and then it went to Matt Reeves, and then Ben Affleck was like, I'm happy about that. I'd play a monkey for Matt Reeves or something, referencing his Planet of the Apes stuff. So, and now we're hearing that Ben Affleck won't be involved in it at all, and that we'll have a new younger Batman. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. I do trust Matt Reeves to make a very kind of dark and detective noir-ish Batman movie, and who they choose as Batman, I think, is going to be very key, because you want a Bruce Wayne that's relatable, as in relatable to what you think. Like, I think some of the Bruce Waynes in the past, like Christian Bale was a great Bruce Wayne. I think Ben Affleck was a very good Batman, very solid Bruce Wayne as well. He looked the part. He played Batman very to a T. I had no problem with Ben Affleck. I think he was kind of just slighted with how these movies came about, and he kind of lost the fun that he thought he might have had, because it's great making these movies, but if they get bad reviews and you're getting flacked for storytelling and stuff, and something you can't control, I don't blame him from maybe losing some of the fun of playing Batman. So yeah, I'm excited about this future Batman movie. Batman has been one of my favorite superheroes, since I was a child. I loved, Batman Forever. Sorry, not Batman Forever. I've loved, the 80s Batman movies. I loved the Dark Knight trilogy. I enjoyed Ben Affleck's Batman. So hopefully this new Batman movie is something that we all can enjoy, and that it, brings back the Batman magic. There's also the Shazam movie that's coming up. We don't know much about this movie either. We just know who's playing the main character. We know there's no teaser out. No, I think there was a title poster out with the font for Shazam, and this could be interesting because we do know that Dwayne Johnson is playing Black Adam. So will we see him in the Shazam movie? Is or is he going to show up in a Man of Steel movie? Because I do remember Dwayne Johnson saying that he'd love to fight Superman or something. So, which brings me to the point where Man of Steel 2, I think, is going to be coming out pretty soon because I know Henry Cavill wants to do something good with the character, and it all depends on who directs it. I think Zack Snyder is going to direct it, but I don't think it would be such a bad idea to give, the reins to someone else. I mean, yes, I know that Zack Snyder, brought this vision of Superman, and he's so, like, deeply involved with him. But, if the movies aren't working, like Man of Steel could have been so much better, and, you know, BVS was not great. So, like, if the movies aren't working, do you really want to bring back Zack Snyder? I mean, if we can take an example from Thor. The first two Thor movies I didn't like them at all. I mean, I thought the first Thor was okay. I thought The Dark World was terrible. And then in the third movie, we bring, Taika Waititi, who just completely turned around the Thor franchise. And, Ragnarok was one of my favorite Marvel movies. So if we can get a director who can, take Superman and, turn him around and make him a great superhero, because he's been very kind of droll, been very kind of like unemotional in these Superman movies. He's been very kind of just run of the mill Superman, saves people, fights, and not with not much emotion. So hopefully we can get a director who maybe brings out some of the American, the justice of Superman, and I'd love to see that because I think Henry Cavill is spectacular. I think he's a great Superman, and he wants to do. I can tell that he wants to do more with him and show more of him. So hopefully we can get that in Man of Steel 2. And if Dwayne Johnson is the villain, that would be even, I think that'd be great because, a fight between those two in the movies would be something that I think everyone would love. And then there's also the Flash movie, which hasn't been confirmed, but I'm intrigued to see that. I'm not sure what to expect from. I think Ezra Miller is a solid Flash, and I did like him in Justice League. I thought he was one of the best parts. But the question is, what storyline will this movie have? Is it going to be, the Flash, Flashpoint? I think it's, what is it called? The Flashpoint Paradox. I mean, I've watched the animated movie that came out a few years ago on it, and I loved it. So if they can do that, where Flash goes back and changes up the timeline or something like that, that would be interesting. But yeah, we don't have much information on that. I think, there's been more information about a new solo Joker film with Jared Leto. There's been news about the movie with the female villains with Harley as the leader, Gotham City Sirens, I believe. So there hasn't been much that we can go off of. All we know for certain is that Aquaman is coming out this year, Shazam is coming out next year, and that's pretty much, all we kind of know right now. And then obviously Wonder Woman, I think, comes out next year too. Yeah, so Wonder Woman 2, which I'm very excited about. I loved the first Wonder Woman. I think Gal Gadot is spectacular. I think Patty Jenkins did a great job, and it was so refreshing to see a female superhero, because you've never really seen a female kick ass. I mean, we've seen Black Widow, we've seen Catwoman, we've seen these female in X-Men, we've seen the females, but we've never really seen a female lead superhero, just do what Wonder Woman did in that movie. So it was great to see, and it was a great movie, and I hope Wonder Woman 2 can be the same of what the first movie was, and if it's better, that's better. So yeah, that's kind of the outlook for the DC for the next maybe couple of years. After 2019, I'm not sure where they're gonna go, what they're gonna do. Hopefully, make better movies is what they're aiming for, because yeah, these movies are making money, but I mean, if they're not, you can see it with Justice League. I mean, it only made 600 or something million worldwide, so you gotta start making good movies to further the DC universe, or you can't hope on catching up with Marvel ever if you keep putting out these kind of just mediocre movies. So that's the kind of outlook on DC for now. And let's switch over to the Marvel side, and boy, do we have a lot to talk about for Marvel. So obviously, I'm hoping everyone saw the Avengers. Now, the ending of the Avengers was something I don't think any of us saw coming, and it kind of threw everyone off balance because usually at the end of Marvel movies, people know what's going on. It's a happy ending, or it's you can expect what to see in the future. But at the end of the Avengers, we really don't have a clue what might happen. I mean, we do know that there's Black Panther sequel coming out. There's a Spider-Man sequel coming out, which I think the title was announced maybe yesterday. I think it was Spider-Man Far From Home, which is rumored to take place after Infinity War. So obviously those characters are coming back, but how will they come back, and will they be used in the promos for Avengers 4? And it's a very uncertain future for all of them, because the original Avengers survived at the end of this one, and I have a bad feeling that most of them won't make it out of the second one. Considering a lot of their contracts are up, and they've just been in it for 10 years, right? I mean, I guess some of them are kind of tired, or they want to move on and maybe go do some other things than just playing the Avengers for so long. I know Chris Evans especially, he's kind of talked about how his contract is up, and I think Thor is the only one, or sorry, not Chris Hemsworth is the only one who said he'd love to do more Thor movies, and I can see why, because after Ragnarok, why not, right? It was great. And so yeah, I think in Avengers 4, we'll see the people who passed away return. I don't know how Gamora is going to return, because she died before the events took place at the end, and it was more of a tragic but casual death. She was pushed off a cliff. So it's going to be interesting to see if Gamora returns, but I do believe Black Panther and Spider-Man and the other guys who were taken away will return. But that's in 2019. Let's look at the movie coming out in a few weeks, actually, which is Ant-Man 2. And I don't know what to think of. I did like the first Ant-Man movie. I thought it was okay. It wasn't anything crazy. It wasn't anything that I'd go back to see. I saw it once in theaters, and then I saw it once again right before Infinity War. So I thought it was a solid movie. From 2, I can expect more of the same. We just get another hero added to the mix with the Wasp, and what I am interested to see is how they discuss the events of Infinity War. Like, is Ant-Man 2, I'm guessing it took place right before Infinity War, because it would, taking place after Infinity War, it'd just be, too much to, so I think this one took it just right before Infinity War, and it might discuss the events of Infinity War. And then next year at 2019, I think I'm not sure, I'm pretty sure that Captain Marvel comes out before Infinity War, so we're gonna get that Captain Marvel movie, and it's gonna be interesting to see how she ties into Infinity War, because obviously at the end of Infinity War we saw Nick Fury dialing in or whatever, calling up Captain Marvel right before he vanished. So is she gonna be a savior in Avengers 4? Is she gonna do something to help the Avengers out? Is she gonna lead them maybe against Thanos? Who knows? But I do know that Captain Marvel is coming out before Infinity War, so we're probably gonna get some. Or I mean, who knows? Because the movie takes place in the 80s, is from what I'm hearing. So it might be more of a um, introduction movie to Captain Marvel, and then maybe the end credits scene might be something more in the future where she gets called on by Nick Fury. But yeah, those are the two movies that are coming up before Infinity or Avengers 4. We don't know what it's called yet. Uh, when the movie was first announced, I think it was Infinity War Part 1 and Infinity War Part 2. But now they've gotten rid of that. Now it's just going to be Avengers Infinity War and then Avengers whatever the title is. And it's going to be interesting to see how Marvel moves forward. Who's going to be like their leading hero? Because we had Iron Man for about 10 years, from 2008 2018. After Infinity or Avengers 4, if Iron Man dies, or if Thor dies, or Captain America, whoever dies, who's going to be the next kind of leading person? And I think Black Panther is he's in a good position to do that. I mean, the Black Panther movie was a hit, obviously, this year. Just a hit globally, or a hit, on the web, on social media. The music album that came out with the movie was great. The movie was great. The actors are great. So I think Black Panther can lead the Marvel franchise. And then obviously we have Spider-Man. Everyone loves Tom Holland. Everyone loves how he portrays Spider-Man. So I think Black Panther and Spider-Man can kind of co-lead the Marvel universe. And another question is, after Avengers 4, when Thanos is hopefully destroyed, who's going to be the next Marvel big villain, right? Because if everyone remembers, I mean, Thanos was introduced in 2012, so right after the first Avengers movie, we had Thanos, and it took 6 years for him to appear in a movie. Well, he was in some Guardians movies after, obviously, but it took until 2018 for him to be the main villain of the movie. So, and they built him up the entire time, right? So who's going to be the next kind of big Marvel villain? And I've been thinking about the recent acquisition of Fox at Marvel that Disney just bought. And they had a bidding war between Comcast, but Disney came out on top and purchased Fox, and the rights of Wolverine, X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and their villains. So yeah, it's gonna be like the next big villain. I mean, I think we could see. My thoughts, or my let's see, predictions for these next few villains. Well, I think for Spider-Man we might see the Sinister Six, especially since there's been rumors about Jake Gyllenhaal playing Mysterio, and we obviously have the Falcon from the first Spider-Man movie, so it'd be easy to incorporate that. But I don't think I can see the Sinister Six as a big kind of movie villain that would require the Marvel villains to team up to fight, right? I think Spider-Man can handle those guys on his own. So if we're gonna look at big villains, on the level of Thanos, we have Galactus, we have Doctor Doom, and we have the Silver Surfer, I think. And we've already seen those villains in previous Fantastic Four movies, not portrayed to their best, I guess. I mean, Doctor Doom was kind of pathetic. I didn't like that movie. I think the Silver Surfer was solid, but still not as to what he could have been. So since Marvel has acquired, or Disney has acquired, these characters back, we could see maybe if Silver Surfer is the main villain, that could tie in with the Fantastic Four, because I do know that they want to do another Fantastic Four, especially since the last one was terrible. And I think Disney, never misses, right? They can do a great job with that, and we can have the X-Men incorporated into this, and that'd be very sick to see, the Silver Surfer portrayed properly as a villain, because the Silver Surfer is a very powerful villain. He can pretty much cause the same amount of destruction that Thanos could. And he's more kind of, he's not a big tyrant monster like most of these super villains are. It's kind of, he's just a man, a Silver Surfer, right? So it'd be more interesting to see that side of a villain instead of a huge monster. And it'd be interesting to see maybe the X-Men along with the Avengers. With I'm not sure what's the future for X-Men. I know there's the Jean Grey movie coming out, X-Men Dark Phoenix, is that what it's called? With I think that's coming out next year, so I don't have many hopes for that. And I wasn't a fan of, I mean, I love X-Men First Class and Days of Future Past, but Apocalypse was really let's not talk about that movie. Especially because I was so excited when Oscar Isaac was cast to play Apocalypse, and Apocalypse was one of my favorite villains, since I was a kid reading the X-Men comics and playing the games. And that movie was just very, very bad. So hopefully the Disney can take some of those characters and some of those storylines and bring them onto screen in a way that we all enjoy it. And how can we have any sort of dealt with Disney, right? Disney Marvel has killed it for the past 10 years. They kind of, early on, the Incredible Hulk and the Thor movies, they kind of stumbled, but after, I'd say, the Avengers, the first one, they've kind of never missed on a movie. So it'll be interesting to see what Marvel has in store for the future, and I hope they can keep it fresh somehow, because I know a lot of people are, not me, but I know some people are kind of getting tired of seeing the same. I know critics are very tired of seeing superheroes, but even us fans can sometimes get, okay, we've seen this before. How can we see? We want something different, which I think why Black Panther was so loved, right? And Wonder Woman were so loved because they were so different. We've never seen a woman, superhero, on screen like that. We've never seen, a black villain, like that, or sorry, a black superhero like that, and a great black villain like that. So if they can keep it fresh, if they can keep it, something that the fans keep enjoying, I think they're in line for more success. And I don't think Marvel, Kevin Feige and the team behind him at Marvel are very good at deciding what to do. And as long as they pick the right directors and they have the right writers and producers and everything, I think Marvel will just keep checking out these great movies. And I have faith in their future. I mean, I know we might see an end of an era after Avengers 4, but it's going to be the start of a new era, and it's exciting to see what they have in plan for us, what they have in store for us. And off that, I just want to go back to DC, and I just want to talk about how DC, it's frustrating because I think DC has better superheroes, not by because I mean, if you have Batman and Superman, those are the two most popular ones, right? And back in 2008, no one knew who Iron Man was. I mean, the Marvel, hardcore fans knew about him, but the general public, I mean, we had the Spider-Man trilogy from the 2000 Spider-Man trilogy and the X-Men. So those are really the only Marvel superheroes that people knew. The Spider-Man and the X-Men. Were in DC, we had Batman and Superman, and they've had their share of great movies, they've had their share of bad movies, and as great as the Dark Knight trilogy is, you can't keep going back to the same trilogy. At some point we have to look at something new and relate to that, because a lot of these kids, they don't remember the Dark Knight trilogy. They aren't old enough for it. These 14, 15, 18, 19-year-old kids were 10, 8, 7 years old back then. So DC has these great characters and they have these great villains, and they just can't seem to bring that magic onto the screen, in live action, obviously. And the animated DC movies are fantastic. I think those are some of the best. The Justice League animated movies, the Flashpoint Paradox, the Dark Knight Returns. I think those are some of the greatest animated movies, superhero wise, that have come forward. But their live action movies have just been really, they haven't been great. And I hope they can recover. I hope they can see as this, since Marvel's 10-year run is coming to an end, they're gonna have to reboot it. I think DC should be able to strike and be like, okay, Marvel had their 10-year successful run. How can we have our own 10-year successful run? How can we create this gigantic universe and make tons of money from it, but also like have tons of positive feedback? So those are my thoughts on DC and Marvel. Obviously this was not like a competition between the two. This is more of just a discussion on where the universes are and where they might be in the future. Oh, and one thing I didn't bring up with Marvel, sorry, Deadpool, obviously. Deadpool's with Fox and now it's under Disney. Just quickly want to say I loved both Deadpool movies. They were both very different in tone, in like just in the feel of the movie. Like if you see the first one, it was obviously the groundbreaking one. The humor, the comedy, the breaking the fourth wall was new, so everyone loved that. And I feel like if they replicated the same thing in the second movie, it wouldn't be as good, which is why the second movie is very different from the first one, but it's good in its own different ways. I loved Cable, the villain. I loved the kid who was kind of the villain. I loved obviously Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool. That was great. I loved Domino. She was fantastic. And from what I'm hearing is that there's not going to be a Deadpool 3. It's going to be more of a X-Force movie, maybe a combination of Deadpool and the X-Men. So yeah, I mean, funnily enough, I didn't bring up Deadpool in my Marvel discussion, but just because of how different it is, like you don't really think of it as a superhero movie, right? It's more of a comedy, an R-rated comedy with superhero aspects in it, which I love. But it's kind of in its own separate little area when you think about the Marvel universe. So yeah, those are my thoughts on those two universes. I might do some more podcasts on the future, just focusing on one universe and talking about the movies in it and the characters and their comic books and their animated movies. My thoughts on each movie in the universe. I'll give you my thoughts on the DCU EU. I think that's what it's called, or is it the DC? But yeah, the Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, and Justice League, those movies. And then I'll give my thoughts on the Marvel universe and my rankings of the Marvel movies, which I've done several times, and it's really hard to make a top 5 in that. It's very difficult because I believe they have 5 or 6 movies that are so good, and they kind of just trade places in my list. But yeah, I can see myself doing a video on that, and also discussing some of my favorite superheroes and who I like the most, and who I grew up liking. And I can also have an in-depth discussion on the X-Men movies and what I loved about the first 3, and then this new trilogy, the differences and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, these are my thoughts on DC and Marvel, and hopefully we get great movies from these two. And I'm looking forward to seeing more action, seeing more superheroes, and where these universes take us, because I feel like they can get better, both of them, and I feel like they can improve, and they can really bring out the love that the fans had while watching the animated shows and the comics. And well, I mean, Marvel has done that pretty much. I just hope DC can do it, and I guess we're gonna see that if they can do it. Thanks for listening to my second ever podcast, and if you're listening, maybe comment below and tell me what you'd like to hear next in another podcast, what you like me to talk about. I'm kind of a fan of everything. So movies, obviously, I can talk about Lord of the Rings. I can talk about, you know, movies, any kind of movies. It doesn't have to be like series. I can talk about music. I can talk about sports, pop culture, anything like that. So comment on what you'd like me to hear, or what would you like to hear, and I will give it a thought and maybe include it in my next podcast. Thanks.